Okay, let's call the meeting to order. I think that John should be here in a minute or two, but let's get going. So I'll start with roll call.
Milton here. Cook present. All present. Eglash here.
And Walt Vogel present. Let's see, oral communications. We have two general non-agenda item communications from Margaret Adkins and Lynn Krug. So this would be the time if you want to step forward. Yeah. Actually, why don't you, we don't have a microphone, do we? Do you mind?
I can speak pretty loud.
Well,
On the recorder?
For the videotape.
Oh, okay.
For the viewers at home.
Okay, okay. Oh, yeah. So, good evening, Utilities Advisory Commission. It's my first time here, so I'm a little nervous, okay? Okay. My name is Margaret Adkins, and I'm the SEIU Chapter Chair for Palo Alto. And I'm here to share some safety concerns that our utility employees are facing. And unfortunately, the employees that are more knowledgeable about the situation could not be here tonight due to the storm. They're either working right now, preparing, or they're at home getting their own stuff together and then on standby. So I'm here to talk about the decision made by the Utilities Engineering Group to train and allow outside contractors to work on live gas in Palo Alto. Live gas work is traditionally the work of Palo Alto employees that are trained and certified and have years of experience working on live gas. The contractors hired have only recently undergone training and become certified, and now they're performing live gas work on Palo Alto homes. Your Palo Alto homes are their first attempt to work on live gas, and your homes are their pilot program. Sometimes the effects of inexperienced workers are immediate, as our utility workers have recently witnessed and have had to correct. But more often than not, it is not until down the road when poor workmanship becomes visible. Long after the contractors have come and gone, and when it may be too late, as in San Bruno or Carmel, as recently as Carmel. Our employees take pride in the work they perform for the city of Palo Alto. Their work is not just a job, it is their career, and they are here for the long haul. So they take pride and they do good work. And it's their safety as well, so they have to do good work. And it may be too late to stop the contractors from completing this work, but we ask that you look into how and why this situation occurred. The decision of your safety and your family's safety should be in your hands and not the decision of somebody else. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And we just,
Yes.
I wanted to ask a clarifying.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say is that we really can't comment on topics that are brought in front of us through public comment. Right. So I still have to clarify.
Yes.
Right,
Go ahead.
right. You're absolutely correct. We can't comment or have any discussion on non-agenda items. But do we know if the workers that the speaker's talking about are actually utilities workers as opposed to public works?
I'm going to have to, this is Jane Ratchey, Assistant Director of Utilities here for Val Fong. I'm going to have to call Tom Marshall, the Assistant Director of Engineering, to answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So the question, is it utility workers as a contractor working for utilities?
Right. My question was if the work that the speaker was describing is work when it's done by city employees, is work that's done by utilities or public works?
Utilities.
It is utilities. Okay, thank you.
Okay, by the way, Foster, present. So I think next public comment is Lynn Krug.
Hi, I'm Lynn Krug, and I work for Water, Gas, Wastewater Utilities Engineering, but I'm here representing Water, Gas, wastewater utilities operations personnel, and that is SEIU personnel who normally perform live gas work for the city of Palo Alto and have traditionally done that after only years and many years of experience, and as qualified to the DOT through operator qualification training. Not only did they receive operator qualification training, but they also have years of experience prior to performing this work. The number one concern of the employees is safety. And they asked me to mention some of these things. If you're going to hire a contractor to perform live gas work on your own home, wouldn't you, just like hiring an electrician, want someone with extensive years of experience and track record performing that work prior to doing this? Would you pay for their training if they had no prior training? And why would you take care of your contractors' I believe they said assets? Would you loan them your equipment, and would you loan them your equipment without specification as to what equipment or conditions? Would you give them unspecified parts? Would you consider hiring a contractor under these conditions, and you would have made an agreement to pay for training, supply undetermined equipment, and prior undetermined parts? Would you call that responsible and safe contract and practice you would want to have happen on your own homes? These workers are very concerned about the cavalier attitude that was taken in distributing this work, and believe it is a huge safety issue for the city to bring in contractors for live gas work that they have traditionally done with many years of experience. Thank you.
Okay, and that is it for public comment. Let me borrow your agenda. And we've rearranged, have we done our?
Announce the agenda rearrangement, so go ahead and do that.
All right, so, Jane, do I have it correct? We're moving item 4 to the first, let's review this all. We're moving item 4 to the first item heard. We're moving item 5 to between items 2 and 3. Okay, fine, so let's move to item 4, which is the staff recommendation that the Utilities Advisory Commission recommend that the council adopt. The minutes. Sorry about that. I'm jumping right ahead. Okay. Do I have a motion on the minutes? First of all, any comments or changes or corrections? Okay. Motion to approve.
Second.
Who was the first?
You made it sound like it was you. but
No, it
didn't.
wasn't. It was
I
Commissioner
move- I move
Eglash.
that we approve the minutes.
Very
as
good.
submitted.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None.
Chair, may I note that
Yes.
in voting for the minutes affirmatively, I abstained from items number 4 and 5. I was absent from those items due to a conflict of interest.
Got it. So noted. Thank you. Okay, we've addressed agenda review and revisions. Does anyone else have any comments on the agenda? I assume not. Okay, so we're good there. Reports from commissioner meetings and events. Anything that anyone wants to add? Okay. Director of Utilities report. Thanks.
Again, this is Jane Ratchie, Assistant Director for Resource Management. I have a few items. I have 3 items under Communications Update. Palo Alto was named the Public Power Utility of the Year. In October, Palo Alto was named the Public Power Utility of the Year for 2014 by the Solar Electric Power Association. The city is the only agency to receive this award and was honored at the Solar Power International Conference for its long-term leadership and innovation in promoting solar energy. We're very proud of that award. There are new El Camino Solar Streetlight Pilot Project. These solar photovoltaic modules are installed on El Camino Real between Embarcadero Road and Park Boulevard. The pilot project will help power the streetlights, send extra electricity back to the grid, allow the city to remotely control lighting, and improve maintenance. The technology will increase renewable energy production at no cost to the city and could help transform streetlights into a network of smart, distributed solar generating assets. Community members are invited to provide feedback through an online survey at cityofpaloalto.org/El Camino Solar Test, one word. ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new landfill gas-to-energy project. On November 13th, local officials and industry leaders commemorated completion of a new landfill gas-to-energy project at Foothills Landfill in San Joaquin County. This is a fifth and final city project with Amoresco Incorporated to purchase clean, renewable energy generated through landfill gas capture. The project will generate 4.3 megawatts of electricity, enough to serve about 3% of the entire city's electric usage and power nearly 3,000 homes each year. Mayor Shepherd helped cut the ribbon in celebration of another successful milestone in the city's commitment to long-term renewable energy supplies. And I have a couple of community outreach events and workshops. On October 25th, utilities staff attended a neighborhood emergency preparedness fair, which is apropos for tomorrow, providing educational materials and information on resources for utility safety and emergency preparedness. On November 18th, utilities participated in the public sustainability workshop hosted by our Chief Sustainability Officer, Gil Friend, to help showcase achievements and initiatives the utilities has engaged in to assist in meeting goals for sustainability in the Climate Action Plan. And then I wanted to let you know that as part of our effort to being a leader is to try to get people to follow us, and in order to do that, we need people to understand what we're doing. And so I'm listing a few opportunities that staff has recently had to speak at different locations to showcase what we do. On October 22nd, utilities marketing engineer Lindsay Joy made a presentation at the Solar Power International Conference in Las Vegas on Palo Alto's solar programs. On November 21st, Lindsay Joy again and Senior Resource Planner Jim Stack participated on a utilities panel for a Stanford University graduate class, the Energy Transformation Collaborative, on Palo Alto's solar programs and renewable power procurement. The students are seeking utilities to partner with for various pilot projects. And on December 4th, Senior Resource Planner Carla Daly spoke at the Renewable Energy Markets Conference in Sacramento on a panel focused on developments in renewable fuel markets, green gas and gas offset products, and electricity offset products. Carla discussed the design and the development of the Palo Alto Green Gas Program. And now I have an update on the Palo Alto Green Gas Program itself. The utility is finalizing print and outreach materials for a soft launch of the program this month. Previous Palo Alto Green participants will have the first opportunity to enroll and will receive letters this month encouraging them to participate. In January, we will mail letters to all customers about the new program and include outreach in the February utility bills. And finally, the Georgetown University Energy Prize update. Georgetown University will announce the competition semifinalists this month and host a webinar to share outreach resources. The utility plans to issue a press release in mid-December announcing our participation and the official start of the competition on January 1st. Staff is finalizing outreach materials, including a new website that will allow customers to pledge to conserve energy, share their ideas with CPAU, and access efficiency resources. That concludes my report.
Any questions? One comment. Yeah, go ahead. Commissioner Walton.
Thank you. Wanted to ask about the solar-powered streetlight trial. That, just given the time of day, that obviously has to include a battery component, I think. Can't imagine any other way of doing it. And I just want to know, I want to understand a little bit about the engineering. I want to know.
Lindsay Joy, Marketing Engineer for our Marketing Group and Utilities. That program is part of our Innovation Testbed project. We were approached by Petra Systems to do this demonstration. It's grid interconnected. There are no batteries, so the power is generated during the sunlight hours, goes right into the grid. Street lights are operating as normally, but there are some added enhancements. Gives us some intelligence on the operation and function of those street lights, so we know if they're burning inappropriately during the day, if they're not burning as they should be at night.
Okay. So it's not really an independent, standalone thing.
Exactly.
It still depends on the grid for power at night.
Exactly.
Seems like it would be a lot more efficient if we could get battery technology to, you could do it off-grid.
I think the purpose of the technology is to look at all potential places to deploy solar and to see about adding smart technology, intelligence, and monitoring to our streetlights. It's not going to be generating a lot of electricity with one module for one streetlight.
Okay. Thank you.
By the way, I think it's actually very helpful to know what you mentioned where members of the staff have been speaking, and I think that would be a good thing to do on an ongoing basis. I don't feel like we've always done that in the past, and it's great to know that. Okay, unfinished business is none, and so now with our rearranged schedule here, so we're moving to item number 4 under new business, which is the staff recommendation that the Utilities Advisory Commission recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution amending water, gas, and wastewater connection and capacity fees and miscellaneous utility charges.
Okay, and we have Assistant Director Tom Marshall here to present that item.
Okay, Tom Marshall, Assistant Director of Utility Engineering. We do not have a presentation on these fees, so we've presented you a staff report and the accompanying materials, which is showing the rates and the increases. One thing I do want to mention at the top, these are just cost recovery fees. It's been a while since we've updated these fees. It's probably been maybe 5 or 6 years at least since they were updated. So there are some substantial increases on various fees because of the long time between the updating. But again, these are cost recovery fees. They're calculated based on the time and material it takes to perform the work, and that's where the fees come from. So from that, I'll open to any questions that you might have and see if I can answer them for you.
Questions? Commissioner Waltfogel? Oh, you need a mic.
Yeah, I think we're sharing, thank you. I think I support the fee changes. However, I would like to get a sense of before and after impact. So for, say, a typical residential project, what would the total utility installation fees be today versus what they would be on April 2nd, 2015 if we enact these fees? Because if it's a really big hit, I think we should just know that, before we go ahead and approve it in one fell swoop.
You gave me a little warning before the meeting, so I had a chance to calculate some numbers for you. So I just went through and calculated, and as we talked about, every service is different depending on what they need at that particular site. If they need sewer, or they don't need sewer, or they need water. So I just calculated the fees if they needed gas, water, and wastewater in a typical for a residential service, which includes the service connections, and then there's the meter charges, and then they would have to pay capacity fees. So if you add all that up, for the before amount is about $13,700 is what it would cost, and the after fees are $17,400. It's about a 27% increase in cost for residential.
And again, you're saying these are fees that have not increased in several years, or good
It's
number
been
of
at
years.
least 6 years since we've adjusted these fees.
Got it.
So I have some questions related to comparables. Perhaps if you could turn to your attachment K, right at the very back of the package. So I noted that you'd managed to do comparables on some of the services, water being the one. But I was just wondering what comparables are available. I know there are none here that might give us some relative degree of comfort around the gas. Let's start with the gas.
Right.
PG&E being the one to point to first.
Right, so we did take a look at PG&E, because we did get your questions early on, and to see what their cost is, and theirs varies between, it looked like they do it by estimate. So you go in, you tell them what you want, and they will give you a price, and I think it varies between a couple $1,000 and $10,000 to get a gas service, residential gas service at
And
PG&E.
are those estimates, as far as you know, based on time and materials?
I
or-
believe they are time and material estimates. They don't really tell you what they do. We went to their site to look what they did, and what they
Right.
do is they give you a range for a residential house, where 70% of them will be in a range of like 2,000 to 7,000, or I don't have the exact numbers here, but then there's some that are even more than that. So it appears that they do it on a case-by-case basis when you go to them. So what we do is we give a one price for anybody that comes in. We get the same price, so we just calculate an average cost.
For a certain size of service?
Correct.
Yeah. And what about on the wastewater side? Did you manage to do any further examples on that?
We did. The problem on the wastewater is that most cities do not own the lower lateral, and that's what we're making them replace, is the lower lateral that the city owns between the main line and the edge of the street, and then they connect with us at that location.
Yeah.
Most cities have the customer owning all the way up to the main. So there really aren't comparables, because nobody else is installing that piece of main that we are.
And when you say nobody, you mean none of the significant cities around the Bay Area?
That's correct. I mean,
Okay.
we looked today, and we couldn't find anybody that was going. I know there's a few cities out there, but we weren't able to do it. But it's pretty rare nowadays that the city owns that piece that we still own in Palo Alto. Almost always now it's owned by the customer.
Okay. That does prompt me to ask, though, would there be any benefit to the city, any cost savings to shifting in that direction for the future?
Having the customers take over that piece,
Yes.
yes, it would have cost savings for the city to shift that piece.
But that concept is not part of this rate connection fee
It's
proposal?
not part of it. I mean, we've contemplated doing that several times, and it is sort of an issue running up into whether the citizens of Palo Alto want to take on that additional cost. It was going on at the same time we were talking about sidewalks at the same time, and there was strong pushback from Palo Alto customers about taking back those additional costs.
Yeah.
So we haven't moved push that forward. There is a possibility we may bring it back related to the cross-border program, because we've inspected most of the laterals now in the city, and we're going about trying to get most of the ones that the city has repaired, and we've talked about it. Once we get them repaired, we might look at turning them back over to the customers, but that have to go to council and go through some policy decision to do that.
Okay. Thank you. I did have some other questions.
Fire away.
So in the schedules, let me see which one I'm referring to. For example, attachment B to do with gas service connection. It looks like you have an excess length fee that applies to an extension greater than 40 feet from the street property line to the gas meter location. And the fee here is $49 a foot. But it doesn't say anything about who covers the trenching cost, because that surely would not.
Okay, so on those, gas services are bored in now, so we're not usually trenching, so
I
it's a
see.
boring service.
And so that would cover the full boring
The
an expected boring.
incremental cost of additional boring to get to
Okay.
a location
Okay.
further away.
All right. I believe that's all the questions I have.
That's it. Commissioner Moulton, did you have a, no? Okay. And, well, yeah, we'll go over to Commissioner Reglash and then acting Vice Chair Waldfogel.
On that last question about the boring and trenching, I'm not sure if I'm more impressed that you had the question or that you knew the answer. Given the size, the significant size of the increase, I was hoping we could talk for a minute about the way the increase is going to be implemented and rolled out, and the amount of notice that we're giving people who might have done planning based on the current numbers, and what thought might be given to whether a change of this size needs a longer notification period so that people aren't taken by surprise, and people who had projects that they were planning and on the verge of embarking on maybe could complete those projects before the increase was implemented. Since the last increase was 6 years ago, people might have reasonably been expecting that there wasn't an imminent increase. And so if you could comment on that and maybe contemplate, gee, what if we waited and implemented these in 2016 instead of 2015? What would that feel like?
Okay, so typically when we make a change like this, we'll give customers a notice, and we usually give them 90 days notice that the fees are going to be changing. So if they come in and pay before the 90 days is up, we honor the existing fees. So that's typically we'll send them letters and let them know. Anybody that has any project on file, we'll send them a letter.
So what you're saying, if I understand your comment, is regardless of the timing of the work, even if the work's not going to occur until spring or summer of 2015, if they're willing to go ahead and pay during the next 90 days, then they can still thereby lock in the rates.
That's correct.
Are there challenges to doing that? Like the project may not be adequately defined yet, so you're not quite sure how much to pay?
So, I mean, typically when the projects are that far along that they've been in, we've already reviewed the plan sets and given them pricing. We will usually give them billing fairly early in the project, and a lot of times customers will sit on those for sometimes up to a couple years before they come in and pay. So what we do is we notify them once we've given them the pricing. So, I mean, if you have a project and haven't moved it forward anywhere, you haven't come to the building department, and you haven't put anything forward, I mean, there's no way we're going to know. So obviously we can't notify those people, but anybody that has something that's in process that we know about, that we've defined fees, we give them a notice.
Thank you.
Sure.
The stepchild here with the microphone. So just one other question, just architecturally, when we look at these fees and these intervals for resetting the fees, is there an alternative approach to, rather than requiring a council resolution to set the fees? Could we, for example, set all the labor rates against some benchmark number that is just automatically reset by the city manager on an annual basis? Or just, some architecture that wouldn't require this kind of complicated process that we only go through, every 5 or 6 years.
So actually it's sort of a legal question, but I believe that there's requirements in the state law concerning these fees. And in fact, we have to notify certain people before we raise them, and I believe it requires some kind of public notice before they get raised. So I think that typically has to be in our form is a council taking action on it, is the public.
Although, to carry the thought further, you could just notice once a year if there's a rate structure and the rates have changed, you could just do a notice. I don't see why that involves the city council. If it's benchmarking and something that changes.
So this is Jessica Mullen from the city attorney's office. So typically when we do a change, and we've never, I don't think, set it as a specific, just kind of a benchmark like this automatically renews. I think we're required to sort of set a specific rate that we're applying. And then when we want to change it, what we do adhere to is that Mitigation Fee Act that's referenced in your staff report, which has those kind of notice and council adherence requirements. And so that's typically how we've handled these increases in the past, and I would imagine would continue to do so in the future because of those requirements.
That's not true how we set our gas rates. Our gas rates are set based on some market signal, so we could do the same thing with these rates.
Well, we also don't necessarily set our gas rates using the Mitigation Fee Act as sort of the applicable law there. These are connection and capacity fees, and also labor rates, which are a little bit of a different animal. So we're following kind of a separate procedure for that. For the other types of rates, those kind of fall under the noticing and kind of public hearing requirements under Prop 26 and 218.
Tom, I realized I did have a follow-up question. So when I read the memorandum, right towards the end of it, it offers some encouragement in terms of cost savings to customers for connections that have domestic fire or irrigation needs. And so it indicated that there will be just be a single pipe, which I read it to be a single charge, but when I turned back to Schedule W-5-2, it indicates that there would be two charges. And I'm just wondering if you could clarify what.
Okay, yeah. It's a little complicated, but I'll try to make it so it's clear. So if you're a residential service, you're going to have a fire sprinkler, and a domestic, you're going to get one essentially pipe to your house. And there's going to be one charge, which is actually there's probably two. You probably have a line and a meter charge, but those two together would be your charge.
Mm.
When you have a commercial service, we typically put in a large fire line, goes in, and they would pay the cost and capacity fees for the large pipe going in. But when we talk about this, we allow them to tap that large service for their domestic. And so there's the cost of putting the service in for the main fire line. That's one cost. And then there's another charge to tap the fire line to put in the domestic service. So that's why there ends up being two. You got one for the main line, and then one is the cost for us to come in and tap that main line and put a domestic service on there. And that's why you end up with two in that case, two charges.
I see. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, if there are no further questions, do we have a motion?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Go for it.
I move that we recommend that City Council approves the recommendations as in the memo with the effective date as in the memo.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Tom, thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, if I've got my order correct, next up is item number 1. That is the staff recommendation that the UAC recommend that the City Council continue the Palo Alto Clean Program at a rate of 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour for a 20-year contract and a program cap of 3 megawatts, as well as add a 25-year contract term and expand the Clean Program eligibility to non-solar renewable energy resources.
Yes. Thank you. You did. You got it perfect. I'd like to introduce Senior Resource Planner Jim Stack, who will present this item.
There we go. All right, good evening, Commissioners. Here to talk about our annual update of the Palo Alto Clean Program. Just a little background here. You're probably aware this program kicked off in March of 2012. Council adopted this. It's a feed-in tariff program. It's a program set up so that local property owners and customers can install a solar power system at their location, and they can sell all of the output directly to the city rather than using it on site. And this was set up as a kind of expansion of all of our different opportunities for customers to participate in solar programs beyond our PV Partners net metering program. When the program kicked off, staff estimated that the value of the solar generation produced in Palo Alto was approximately 14 cents, around 13.5 to 14 cents per kilowatt hour. That included the value of the energy, the renewable energy attribute of it, as well as the avoided transmission and certain capacity charges that we would have to pay for procuring that energy elsewhere. So that's where we set the rate for the program. The price that we were offering customers was 14 cents at a fixed rate for a 20-year contract. At the time, we set a cap of 4 megawatts participation in the program, and we limited it to solar technologies, and the program was set to expire at the end of 2012. There were no takers that year, so we came back to council in the end of 2012 seeking some updates. And the council approved increasing the price of the program to 16.5 cents in order to encourage more participation in the program. But given that that was providing a bit of a subsidy to the program that would have an impact on ratepayers, they lowered the cap on the program, the participation cap, to 2 megawatts. And they directed staff to come back in a year or when that cap was reached. Again, there were no takers in the program. So earlier this year, we came back again and council approved one slight change to the program. Again, they maintained the rate at 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour over a 20-year contract term. It's still just open to solar projects, but they increased the cap from 2 megawatts to 3 megawatts earlier this year. And again, there's no deadline, but they directed staff to come back in about a year, which is what we're doing now. We're in the process of. So far, again, there have been no PPAs executed under this program. No power purchase agreements have been struck. But you may be aware that earlier this year, the city put out an RFP, request for proposals, seeking interest in executing a lease for at certain city garages and parking facilities where the lessee could have access to that rooftop space and so that they could participate in this program. And currently, the city, I believe, has selected a finalist out of that RFP, and we're in the process of negotiating the lease. So that's where we stand, and we're expecting when that lease is finalized that counterparty will submit an application to the Clean program, and that will take up about a megawatt and a half, 1.5 megawatts, which might be our first participant in this program. So.
One facility or a whole raft of facilities?
I believe it's 4 facilities? 5 facilities.
Mostly parking garages?
Yep. Okay. So one of the things we come back to you every year with is our update on the value of the local solar energy that's generated, just to give you a sense of where we stand and whether we need to raise or lower the contract price for the program. It hasn't changed very much in the past year. Our estimate of the value of solar has declined since the program was kicked off in 2012. The price of solar, across the world has declined as module prices have declined. But we haven't seen very much change over the past, year or so. So our estimate of the value of local solar today is about 10.3 cents levelized over a 20-year term, compared to 9.9 cents earlier this year. I think the slight difference is due to an increase in our forecast of transmission costs going forward that will be avoided by local generation. So in view of the very small change in the value of local solar, that leads to our first recommendation, which is to maintain the program price at the 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour level for local solar resources. This is in view that the avoided cost has not changed very much. We're also very close to getting our first contract in place with a participant at the 16.5 cent level. And just to summarize, we feel it's justifiable to provide a slight subsidy compared to the avoided cost for local solar based on the kind of non-monetary values that it provides to the city, such as the local economy, reduced need for investing in new transmission projects to remote locations, providing shade at local facilities, and providing higher system reliability locally. But we're recommending maintaining the 3 megawatt cap for local solar resources, given that there is a rate impact due to this contracts being executed in this program. And then the other change we're recommending this year is adding a 25-year contract term option. Earlier this year, one of my colleagues, Lindsay Joy, sent out a survey to some developers that have expressed interest in the program, and we keep them on a distribution list, asking if they would have any recommendation for changes that they'd like to see in the program that would make it more appealing to them. We had a few responses indicating that they might like to see some different contract term options, including a 25-year term. So we're recommending providing either a 20-year or a 25-year contract term option to them. We think this aligns, the 25-year term aligns better with the lifetime of the solar panels, as well as the warranties for those panels. And in terms of the cost to the city, there's virtually no difference in our view of the avoided cost of local solar over 20 years versus 25 years. So the city is pretty much indifferent to offering these two contract terms. So we're recommending providing them that option. The second change we're recommending making is maybe a little bit more substantial. We recommend expanding the program's eligibility criteria to include non-solar local renewable resources. And we're doing this for a couple of reasons. We've kind of talked about opening it up to non-solar resources even from the time that we initiated the program. I think initially we didn't open it to non-solar resources because we had another competing program in place, the plug-in program, which was the program Power from Local Ultra Clean Generation Incentive Program, which was a program geared towards non-solar programs of the same sort. However, earlier this year, Council terminated that program. So we are recommending extending this to non-solar resources. And one project that's been mentioned as a possible participant on the non-solar side is the anaerobic digester facility that's being contemplated down by the wastewater treatment plant. However, given that non-solar resources don't provide the same sort of non-monetary benefits to the city that solar resources do, we're recommending offering non-solar resources a price that's equal to the avoided cost of that generation, which for non-solar, given that it has a different energy profile, generation profile, we estimate it to be 9.3 cents for a 20-year term and 9.4 cents for a 25-year term. So those are the prices we're recommending offering non-solar resources. And given that we are offering a price that's equivalent to the value of the energy that we would be receiving from them, we are recommending not putting a cap in place for participation in the program for non-solar resources, since there's essentially no impact on ratepayers from their participation. So that is it for my presentation.
Thanks very much. Questions, comments?
Thank you very much for a nice presentation and for sticking with this program over time. The payment is specifically for power delivered, correct? Not for nameplate capacity.
That's correct. It's like a regular PPA. We pay only for what we receive from the customer.
Right. So if, for example, the efficiency of the photovoltaic panels degrades, particularly as we look at the longer time frame to 25 years, there's no economic impact to us because we're only paying for the kilowatt hours that are actually delivered.
That's correct.
Thanks. Secondly, when we think about non-solar resources, as you talked about at the end of your presentation, are there any unintended consequences that we need to be a bit careful of here? I'm not sure I know what they might be, but when we're talking specifically about photovoltaic, we understand what that is. That's providing energy that has no air pollution or greenhouse gas emissions during the time when the sun is shining. As soon as we say non-solar, it opens it up not only to things we can anticipate, like the anaerobic digester you mentioned, but maybe things we can't anticipate. Just to be specific, if for example, I were to go buy a bunch of old automobile lead acid batteries and fill my garage with them and get time of day pricing and charge them at night when electricity is really cheap, and then use them through an inverter to sell electricity back to Palo Alto when energy is expensive during the day. Would that count as a non-solar renewable energy, and could I basically be taking advantage of different prices at different times of day to make money off the city?
For that example, I don't think that would qualify as a renewable resource, just battery technology using energy from the grid and arbitraging it.
Right, but I guess my point is the law, the policy that we're about to implement here, clear enough to support that common sense answer that you just gave to my ridiculous example? And if not, what would block that ridiculous example? And what about other examples that might not be as ridiculous?
Well, the program rules and regulations stipulate that the resource has to be considered RPS eligible, has to be renewable
In our sole discretion?
under the state.
According to the California Energy Commission. Where is that in the memo? Under participation eligibility.
That's right.
It's open to any eligible renewable energy resource which is capitalized, meaning it has a legal definition as defined in section D4 that satisfies these program requirements.
Correct.
And then D4 says it means an electric generating facility that's defined and qualifies as an eligible renewable energy resource under the California Public Utilities Code. So we know we're on safe ground with respect to renewable. But I guess my question still stands, because what we're talking about is a feed-in tariff. So we're talking about something where we're guaranteeing the price for a long time. So I guess back to my question, are there risks here that we need to get our heads around regarding the expansion to non-solar resources? For example, is there any precedent at Palo Alto or any other city in the United States of offering a feed-in tariff to non-solar resources? And could you tell us about that, or someone in the room? And my guess is we're not paving new ground here in offering a feed-in tariff to non-solar resources. I just offhand haven't thought about it.
Wind is the obvious one.
Well, wind would be the obvious one, and so I was going to come to wind in a minute. So I guess while we're wondering about others, maybe we should come to wind for a minute. So say we had some homeowners or businesses that wanted to install some of these small wind turbines that are available on their property. Would there be a zoning review of that in case these wind turbines offered aesthetic or noise or bird safety issues? Because we're creating an incentive and, in fact, an endorsement through a feed-in tariff program for such things.
Well, I think that would have to go through a regular city review process. I imagine the
Just like
architecture
anything.
review board and, but they may be an environmental review process.
I would think so too, right? Because obviously there's nothing in this document that says otherwise.
Yeah,
So
this doesn't waive any of those project review.
right, clearly it doesn't. So maybe that's not something we need to be concerned about. Did you have a related question that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I just wonder whether, maybe you can just tee this up. Jane just mentioned a green gas program, so would a green gas program plus a fuel cell be a qualified renewable resource under the CEC?
I believe it would, yes.
It would be semi-difficult to get green gas, but if
Well,
they
I think
did.
you just mentioned that we're about to initiate a program.
But to be clear, using city-supplied natural gas and a bloom box to generate electricity would not be a CEC-approved
But if it's
program.
That's correct.
But if it's greened up through a Palo Alto green gas program, then you just mentioned this.
Oh, those are environmental offsets. That program does not have physical green gas or biogas.
But I think this is the kind of corner case that Commissioner Eglash is asking about.
To be eligible under the Public Utilities Code as a renewable resource, I think the physical gas has to come from a renewable resource. So it can't be regular gas that's been greened up.
So I didn't want to, it was not my intention to waste everybody's time tonight on absurd questions or ridiculous corner cases. It just occurs to me that I don't really understand what it means to say that we've got a feed-in tariff for non-solar, and I was looking for some clarity, and perhaps without, totally diverting the entire discussion tonight for longer than we want. Given this discussion, would you like to share your opinion of whether this is a solid and well thought out part of this, or whether the Utilities Commission ought to consider approving this without the non-solar so that there can be more time and thought given to the non-solar piece? I'm sort of putting you on the spot there. You don't have to answer.
I think it makes sense to expand this and not discriminate against non-solar resources. I think the city has other processes in place for reviewing projects and determining whether they make sense, separate from the utilities process. So I think as long as a resource can get through the zoning and other permitting requirements that the city has in place, we shouldn't preclude it from participating in this program.
Yeah, now again, to be clear, you're also proposing no cap on the non-solar. So we think we're protected because we're doing this at avoided cost. But on the other hand, it's a 20 or 25-year contract. So again, I think as my final comment, and then I want to allow the conversation to move forward, I guess I'm left feeling uneasy that I don't necessarily fully understand the consequences of offering long-term contracts at today's avoided cost for projects of any size and scale and any modality. It just seems a bit open-ended for my taste, especially since very large projects can often have unique sorts of economics and unique sorts of long-term risks associated with locking in a price for that long. I guess, I'm thinking out loud here, so bear with me. I guess the counter example would be that we sign long-term PPAs all the time, and maybe what we're talking about doing here is ultimately no different than a PPA, because we do agree to long-term PPAs at preset rates all the time as part of meeting our renewable portfolio standard. So, Jane, you were about to say something. Maybe you'd like to comment on that notion that maybe this really isn't all that different from the PPAs we execute all the time anyway?
Well, I think it isn't. One of the issues is we'll be coming back just like we do with the solar part of the CLEAN program every year to reevaluate this. So we're not going to have that price hanging out there for years and years without changing it. But the worry about the technologies, I think we really don't expect to see local renewables that are non-solar in Palo Alto, except perhaps the anaerobic digester. We don't really think, and Jessica was just bringing up the LADWP program does open their program to wind and biogas, or biomass. Yeah, the only, I think, slight issue is each type of renewable generation has a slightly different generation profile. For example, solar is in the daytime. A anaerobic digester is sort of a base load 24/7. Wind is a possibility in town, very unlikely, but it would have a very different generation profile from this base load. And this price is really based on a base load shape. And so that's, I guess, a slight concern that, you could say, why don't you come back with a different price for wind? Because it could be, we've seen some complicated programs, feed-in tariff programs, where it's, here's the price for off-peak for these months, and here's the price for on-peak for these months, and if you have this type of a program that or project where you expect off-peak and on-peak during different months, you get magically some sort of a rate that comes out of what the generation profile generally is. But I still don't think that it's that different. And so my feeling is this is a well-thought-through program. We really don't expect to see really anything except for the anaerobic digester. The other way to maybe ease some of your worries is to put a cap on this program. Right now we're saying because it's the price we're offering is the same as the value, unlike the solar part, then maybe putting a cap on it would help with the risk that you see.
Thank you for that thoughtful comment. I think you're probably right. I think this is probably fine. I would note, though, that in the case of PPAs, each individual PPA is discussed by this committee, and then by finance, and then by the council.
Right.
And in this case, we're talking about putting a policy in effect where we're committing the city to projects of unlimited size without any further review by the commission, finance committee, or full council. So just to throw a thought out there, one thing that my colleagues and I might want to contemplate is to say that for projects larger than, say, 2 or 3 megawatts, they're subject to review and approval by the council, the same way large PPAs are.
Do you want to comment on that? Or do you want to reserve?
I think that would be a fine change if you wanted to make it. That sort of defeats the purpose of a feed-in tariff program. The whole point kind of a feed-in tariff program is that there's a known price, there's a known contract, everything's known about it, and you don't have to take months and months to get review. I just think the chances of some giant locally sited renewable project are incredibly remote. There's just not enough land for anyone to put one on, for one thing. But if you're worried.
Yeah, although that one reaches you better than this one.
But I think that.
All right, you're next.
Thank you for that comment. I mean, to that point, I think that for small projects, the things that are getting developed, retail, a couple hundred kilowatts, sub-megawatt, you certainly want to have some fixity of policy and, some known situation. But as you reach into the multi-megawatt range, these are inherently projects with long lead times and with complicated, development aspects. So it's probably not unreasonable to expect that there'll be negotiation over multi-megawatt scale projects.
So thanks for your presentation and all the hard work. I agree. This program, we've held it out there, and we've had the fortitude to know that someday, at an attractive price, we would finally get people. And it sounds like we've got folks coming in potentially to sign up for that, or at least one potential customer, maybe hopefully more interest. I have some problems with the idea that the aerobic digester might be part of this program, and a lot of it has to do, the two aspects of that worry me. One has to do similar to those that Commissioner Eglash and Commissioner Volkvagel indicated. That is, it could be very large, and I think that in that case, you don't really have any distinction between a normal negotiation for a unique power source in the form of a PPA, and so tucking it into this program that has more or less kind of the attraction of a uniform tariff doesn't seem to fit. The second point about it really in effect is as I understand it, you could correct me on that, is the digester is likely to be a city-owned project, not city utilities, but a city-owned project. In which case it's a transfer price. And I think the appearance of having an internal transfer price wrapped into this and perhaps enjoying some of the benefits of a feed-in tariff, I don't think is going to sit very well with the public. So I wouldn't support that particular example being in the program. I do like the idea, though, of having a feed-in tariff available. For example, you could have fuel cells. We don't know where fuel cells are going. As they are utilized more and more for transportation, the price points, I'm not that current with familiar trends. I know some of these commissioners are more so than I. But I have a sense that the price trajectory will be coming down with more volume of those things in the market, and you could find that at a similar price to 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour, that you could have some interest amongst fuel cell developers that are local that would enjoy this and then provide the local benefits you mentioned. So I guess those are my summary points.
A few comments here. that covers some of what's already been discussed and then a few other points. This program has been in place for a couple of years. We've had no takers on it. Obviously, in some ways, that's not ideal. We don't particularly like throwing a party and having nobody come. On the other hand, I don't see that as a reason not to continue the program. I think it's helpful to have it out there. At some point, they will come, or they won't, and we'll learn lessons either way. It costs us essentially nothing to have it out there, and it does sound like we are finally at the point of getting a taker, and that would be great. So I am supportive of the element of continuing the program with respect to solar resources at the 16.5-cent level. I'm certainly fine with the 25 or 20-year contract. With respect to the other, the non-solar renewables, actually, let me just go back for one moment on the solar part. It's worth noting as well that the incremental cost to ratepayers is very small. It looks like for the median residential customer, assuming the program is fully subscribed, the cost would be, if I'm doing my math correctly, 12.5 cents per month. And so I think that's something that is tolerable. With respect to the non-solar resources, I understand the concerns that have been raised. With respect to I do believe this is focused on the anaerobic digester. I don't think we're likely to see, to Jane's point, major other non-solar renewable projects. I think the anaerobic digester has been a complicated project for the city. It continues to be complicated and so on and so forth. And I think
And they just, at the last council meeting, it's pushed out for years.
Exactly, and it sort of never gets nailed down. I do sense that basically allowing the anaerobic digester, whenever it gets built, however it gets built, to sell in, or perhaps it's transfer pricing with a specified price, sort of locks down one variable. And it's like, okay, here's one thing in this rather complicated project that now can be counted on is, okay, we're going to sell the power to CPAU at a set price, at a price that is our avoided cost, in other words. And so it strikes me as kind of reasonable. And so that's why I'm fine with it, although, I hear the concerns and so on and so forth. So I am supportive of that element as well, and those are my 2 cents. Comments at this end of the table. Commissioner Melton.
I'm also comfortable with it, and I'm particularly in that I'm pretty well convinced that there is not going to be an off-the-wall project, because the type of project isn't even at our discretion. It has to be in accordance with the state public utilities code. It's called out in the policy. So it's got to be something that the state has defined as a renewable resource. And so, again, out of our discretion, and therefore, I don't expect under that definition, I don't expect anything off the wall.
I like the staff recommendation. I would put a cap. So if anyone comes up with a compelling project that's much larger than, I would say, a 3 megawatt cap, just since that's what we've already had. If they have a project that they can do at this price, and it's much larger, then they would be coming and telling us about it, and we'd be eager to hear about it. We'd be glad to discuss it, and we can do it. We could increase the size of the feed-in tariff or just do a power contract for it. I don't see that as being a problem, but it might be good just to keep a cap, just to be able to have easy control over that. I'm not so worried about the transfer pricing because it's avoided cost, so I'm good with this, but I would add a 3 megawatt cap.
And to be clear, when you say that, you're not suggesting that the city would necessarily reject something greater than 3 megawatts, just that it needs to be discussed and requires approval. And perhaps there's some way to communicate that to project developers. It's not that we're opposed to larger projects, it's just that we don't want to be on record of providing a program that causes them to be approved without further review.
Do you want to make any comments on either the presence of the cap or the proposed size of the cap?
I had actually a question for Jim. How big is the anaerobic digester likely to be?
The wastewater treatment plant staff currently envision it to be a set of 3 800-kilowatt engines, of which 2 would be operating around the clock at any given time, and the third one would be idle and being, subject to maintenance. So essentially 1.6 megawatts operating at any one time.
Okay. And I just wanted to remind you that when we brought the plug-in program here, we said at that time, we are taking this option off the table, and we will come back for an option for the anaerobic digester through the clean program. And I don't know if you remember that. And so this is following up on that, where we said we're taking this away and we're bringing it back through here. So I didn't know if you were going towards only approving the solar part and not the non-solar, or just putting a cap on the non-solar, but I just wanted to bring that point up.
I think that when I hear this discussion going, I'm anticipating support for everything, but there is obviously support in some members of the UAC for a cap on the non-solar part. Although from what I'm hearing, what you're saying, that cap may not impact the anaerobic digester. Let's do the following. I'm going to make a motion, and then I think someone's going to make a substitute motion, and that's fine, because that's how we do things around here. So I'm going to move to approve the staff recommendation as is. Remember my Robert's Rules of Orders. Now someone can make a substitute. Oh, wait, do we have a substitute motion?
You could do a substitute motion or a friendly amendment if you feel so.
Okie dokie. All right, well, I'm not making a substitute. So, but, you want to make your substitute motion?
Sure. So,
I think in this case, it's better to do as a substitute motion, and we're just going to have a vote on that and see how it all turns out.
So Jane's comment a moment ago that this was really intended to be part of following through on earlier discussions to address the anaerobic digester makes me feel like we haven't really had the appropriate discussion tonight, because the non-solar part of this was presented almost as an afterthought with very little discussion of what it means and what the motivation was, other than saying, well, gee, if we're going to do it for solar, we should do it for non-solar as well. And so while I'm supportive in principle and in general of doing something like this for non-solar as well, I don't feel like we've heard from staff the way we normally hear from staff, where they've thought through the implications and consequences and we get a full-fledged presentation. So I'd like to propose a substitute motion that completely eliminates the non-solar part of this. I am not proposing, as we anticipated a minute ago, a cap, but for the reasons I just mentioned, I'm proposing that we direct staff to come back to us with a motion at whatever schedule staff wants, with a feed-in tariff program for non-solar, where we can get the sort of full-fledged and well-thought-out presentation that we're used to. And in fact, I'm quite confident that following such a presentation, there might not even be a need for a 2 or 3 megawatt cap. It might be that that's an opportunity to approve something bolder. But so my substitute motion is to eliminate the non-solar part. So if we look at the summary on page 1, that would be to eliminate 1C.
Second. Oh. I second that.
Okay, any comments or discussion on the substitute motion? If not, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 1 abstention. James, are you abstaining? Passes 3-2. We're done.
Did you raise your hand?
Yeah. Passes 3-2, 1 abstention. We're done. Okay, how about that? James. So, Jane, do you have that? Who was who on that? I think you got Steve, Asher, and
I need
Garth.
a little clarification on the substitute motion. One is that it is just part of the it is the 1A and.
Well, we should go to the attach.
B,
We really need to go to the attachment, not the memo, right?
and so you are saying you want council to direct staff to return with a non-solar proposal.
Let's see, let's get it right. So 1A is the extension of the solar program and the 25-year contract term. 1B says allow non-solar. And C is also about non-solar. So I actually misstated it. I don't think anyone misunderstood me, but I misstated it. B and C are struck. It's 1A that we just voted on. And
you want to add something to recommend that council direct staff,
I see what you're saying.
because you can't
That-
direct staff.
That doesn't have to be a formal part of the motion.
That's not a part of the motion.
I was thinking it was not part of the.
Right, that's an informal comment, not part of the motion, saying we would welcome staff. That's something to be put in the minutes, but not part of the motion.
It's funny that they can direct staff through that.
Just saying that we're by no means opposed to non-solar. We just want to see a fully, one of staff's usual excellent, thorough presentations on it before voting on it.
Since I overheard council, I actually believe that your motion included sustaining point 2 in the recommendation.
Right. I'm sorry for being so careless. Right. We wanted to strike 1B and 1C, but retain 1A and 2. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's see if I can keep track of where we are at this point. Let me see.
Item number
we're
2.
on the speaker for number 2. I'm sorry, what? Oh, wait, number 2? We are on what is on our original agenda, number 2, and you said we have a speaker?
We have a speaker card for number 2.
Aha. Okay. Just for this one? Phew, keeping track of everything. Okay, so sure, let's have our, Megan King, come on up. Hi there, thanks for coming.
Am I up first?
You're up first.
Awesome. Well, I am Megan King. I'm with 3 Degrees. First of all, thank you for the Palo Alto staff that invited me to be here today. Earlier, we definitely heard a very impressive list of the presentations that Palo Alto has participated in the past few months, and it really drives home something that 3 Degrees has known for quite a while now.
Hold that.
Oh. We okay now? All right. Alrighty. Well, it really drives home something that 3 Degrees has known for a while now, that Palo Alto truly is a leader in the renewable energy world. Many utilities look to you for guidance and in modeling the way that they run and the programs they launch. As an active company in the community solar industry, 3 Degrees is concerned with one of the recommendations that the staff is bringing to you today, specifically with regards to the treatment of RECs. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, the green guidelines are clear. When a customer believes that they are buying renewable energy, they need to receive the RECs or have them retired on their behalf. Failure to do so is a double claim in clear violation of the FTC green guidelines. How does Palo Alto plan on avoiding double claims with that recommendation? Thank you.
That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask questions? Someone making you ask questions, not a discussion, but just ask clarifying questions. This is an agenda item, right?
Yeah, sorry.
You can have a discussion.
Oh, we can have a discussion?
Yeah, it's sort of an agendized item, so yeah, you have a little bit more latitude than in sort of open comments.
Okay, a couple of questions on how does the residential customer use these RECs realistically?
Great question. So when a customer makes a claim saying, I'm really excited, I just signed up for the Palo Alto Community Solar Program. I'm offsetting my home's energy usage with solar panels on that community center over there. They have claimed the REC. And in the legal guidelines of the FTC, that REC has been retired by the sake of the customer making the claim on the REC. So if the utility at the same time is retiring RECs towards your RPS, there's a double claim being made.
And, okay, and is anyone particularly injured by that?
Sort of the entire structure of the REC system. There are very strict policies in tracking double claims, and there is legal follow-up as well.
Does the FTC have, to the best of your knowledge, and Jessica, you may want to weigh in on this, and you may need to check this, have binding legal authority on this? Is this advisory? Is this what, how does this all work?
Are you asking specifically towards double counting or community solar?
The double counting issue you're raising.
To the best of my knowledge, they have authority as the Trade Commission to protect consumer rights with regards to RECs, to the best of my knowledge.
I see. So I was trying to figure out the FTC angle on this. It's a consumer rights
Protection
issue.
agency.
Okay, now that's what I was sort of struggling with. Steve?
You said your employer is 3 Degrees?
3 Degrees.
What business is 3 Degrees in?
We are in the renewable energy industry. We buy and sell renewable energy certificates. We manage utility green pricing programs, and we are in the community solar industry.
What do you guys do in community solar? Do you run community solar?
Great question. We are currently engaging in running community solar and marketing community solar programs.
As in you're not the project developer, you market them.
We market them, and we have
Got it.
developer partners.
Where are you based? I mean, where's
San
3
Francisco.
Degrees is based in San
Yes,
Francisco?
San
Okay,
Francisco.
got it. All right, sounds good. Okay, anyone else have comments or questions? Okay, thank you for coming down and for your comments. Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah, so I'd like to,
And is your, red light on?
Yes.
okay, and I just want to introduce Resource Planner Amy Bailey, who will be presenting this report.
Thanks, Jane, and good evening. So this presentation, as you already know, is about the establishment of a community solar program for the city. There are 3 specific areas where we're seeking UAC guidance on, policy guidance. First, establishing the program with a proposed program design, which will be described shortly. Second, using the environmental attributes from the program for the city's RPS. And third, setting the power purchase rate to the clean rate of 60.5 cents per kilowatt hour and establishing a program cap of 3 megawatts. Okay, for background, our city council approved the local solar plan in April of 2014. It established the overarching goal of meeting 4% of the city's electricity needs from locally deployed solar by 2023, which is up from 0.7% in 2013. And a variety of strategies were identified to help in achieving that overarching goal, as you can see by these surrounding hexagons. One of these strategies in specific is to develop a program for customers without good solar access, and the community solar program focuses on exactly that. So the general definition of community solar is a solar electric system that, through a voluntary program, provides power or financial benefit to or is owned by multiple community members. SEPA, the Solar Electric Power Association, reported that the number of community solar programs across the U.S. has jumped substantially, 60% since spring 2013. And this rising popularity in community solar is attributed to the fact that many people would like to experience and derive benefit from solar. However, the majority of residential rooftops are unsuitable for an on-site system due to shading, structural, and ownership issues, for instance. Palo Alto, for example, as you know, has a very extensive urban tree canopy that shades many residences and businesses. 42% are renters, 38% of residents live in multifamily homes, and all of these groups of people have in the past not had an option to go solar. So this community solar program would give them that option. In the initial stages of the community solar program development process, staff defined 4 different design constraints. First, the solar facilities must be sited within the city of Palo Alto. Second, the city itself will not develop, own, operate, or maintain the solar facility. Third, the program must work within the constraints of our billing system and therefore must not utilize virtual net metering. I'll come back to virtual net metering later on. And fourth and finally, the vendor must take on the program administrator role. And within these 4 design constraints, staff put out a request for proposals for a program. The RFP asked for proposals for a vendor to come in, find sites, develop, operate, and maintain the solar facilities, and also to set up, market, and administer the program. Besides the 4 design constraints, other aspects of the program were left open-ended so that vendors with on-the-ground experience could propose what they thought would make for the most successful program. And after an extensive review of proposals, which included in-person interviews for the top 3 finalists, staff then finalized the program design and selected a finalist, which is Clean Energy Collective, or CEC for short. A distilled version of the program design is this. The vendor, CEC, is responsible for going out and finding sites and then developing, operating, maintaining the solar facilities. Once they build the facilities, then they're also responsible for marketing the program and enrolling participants. The participants will purchase panels on a dollars per watt basis for a certain amount of capacity, which can be as small as a single panel, but there is an upper limit, which is equivalent to the limit of their on-site consumption. Once they have the panels, the participants in return will receive a monthly monetary bill credit on their electric utility bill that's equivalent to their proportional share of the electricity production from the solar facility. And then CPAU will work with the vendor to ensure proper monthly billing credits. So here's a larger infographic of the program design. There are 3 entities again. CPAU on the upper left, the participants on the upper right, and then also Clean Energy Collective. And this slide I've also grouped together with CEC the Community Solar Project LLC, which would be developed for the community solar facilities. And then there are 2 sets of agreements. On the right-hand side, each program participant will enter into an agreement with CEC, which is subject to city review. On the left-hand side, that set of agreements is between CPAU and the Clean Energy Collective, which would include a power purchase agreement for the community solar facilities developed through the program, and also the services agreement outlining all of the programmatic tasks, including marketing, program enrollment, and the transfer of bill credits to the program participants. The participants, again, pay an upfront payment for a certain amount of capacity. CPAU receives all of the energy and output, and then instead of paying a single entity, which is what normally happens in a traditional PPA, that payment is distributed amongst the program participants according to their proportional shares of capacity. It's important to note with this proposed program, on-site consumption by the participant is billed as it normally would be according to their electricity rate. It's completely independent from these monetary bill credits applied to their electric utility bill through program participation. There are 2 primary alternative program designs that have emerged during staff research in the RFP process. The first is a green power purchase program, but exclusively for solar. So in that case, it would be very similar to the Palo Alto Green program, for instance, but instead of using unbundled RECs, renewable energy credits purchased on the market to green the participants' power, the program would use bundled RECs from local solar installations in Palo Alto. Staff doesn't recommend this option because CPAU already offers multiple green power purchase programs. Palo Alto Green is still a program offering for our commercial customers, and also Palo Alto Green Gas is just now launching. Having an additional green power purchase program for solar could lead to confusion and competition between the program offerings. Another limitation of a green power purchase program is that it does lack some of the tangible connections between the program participant and the solar facility compared to a capacity-based offering where participants sign up for a certain amount of capacity. This tangible connection has been espoused by other program administrators as being a success factor in the program because it better simulates the connection between residents and their on-site installations. Some program administrators, for instance, even have kickoff events where participants will sign the back of their panels as a part of the installation. The second program design that emerged was a subscription model combined with virtual net metering. Virtual net metering is an arrangement where a solar facility's energy credits on a kilowatt hour basis could be allocated to other account holders. For this program, for instance, the participant would pay a monthly fee for a certain amount of capacity, and in return, they would receive a kilowatt hour credit proportional to their share of capacity's energy production, and that kilowatt hour credit would be added to their bill, which would net out some of their on-site consumption. Virtual net metering in this way simulates what it's like to have a solar system on your roof that's generating energy credits that nets out on-site consumption. Staff does not recommend this program option because of the complexity and expense of implementing virtual net metering. In fact, virtual net metering was one of the program design characteristics that we defined in the beginning that we could not accommodate given the constraints of our current billing system. There are also alternative ways to treat the environmental attributes of the community solar facilities. The staff recommendation, again, is that the city pays for the energy and renewable energy credits at the clean price and retains the RECs for the city's RPS portfolio. So one advantage of this recommendation is that the underlying price and REC dynamics is the same as the clean program, but it has basically a community solar program embedded on top of it. The second option is that the city could pay for the energy and RECs at the clean price and retire the RECs on behalf of program participants, similar to what the speaker had mentioned, so that participants could exclusively claim the environmental benefits. The advantage of this option would be that REC ownership in this case mimics what it would be like to have solar on site on your own roof. Since if you have solar on your roof, you do retain the RECs for the energy that you're generating. The one disadvantage would be is that CPAU would effectively be browning green power by retiring the RECs for the participants, and so we would need to go out and buy additional renewable energy credits to maintain our carbon neutral portfolio. The third option listed is that the city could pay for the energy only at the clean price minus the value of a solar REC. Then the vendor could retire the RECs on behalf of participants. The advantage of this option, again, like number 2, is that it mimics on-site solar adoption, the REC ownership does. It has the same disadvantage in that we would be browning green power and then needing to go out to buy additional RECs. But this option would have the least rate impact. Okay. One important aspect of a community solar program is the value proposition to customers. And this graph shows the system costs for solar installed within our service territory. And this data runs through about the beginning of 2014. The estimated cost for participation in this community solar program, as proposed by our top vendor, compares very well to the price of solar to install it on site. And so this would not be a very expensive option, at least compared to on-site adoption. And using the recommended PPA rate of 16.5 cents, the simple payback period works out to be approximately 15 years for participants. So here are the tentative next steps.
Just interject for 1 second. I'm going to ask a question on that slide, if you go back to that, just to save us from doing so at the end. How can it be that there have been deployed systems at a lower cost than a community solar project? The idea in general of community solar is it's, because of scale, supposed to be less expensive than anything. Any idea why that is? Right, we're seeing, if I'm reading, I assume the dotted line is where we're assuming CEC is coming in. So we see a few dots below it. We see lots of dots above it. I'm just curious, do we have any idea how people are doing solar systems less expensively than community solar?
Well, I can offer a personal experience, I volunteer through Sunwork, which is a nonprofit organization that passes through costs of the solar system and relies on a volunteer workforce. And they're very cost competitive.
Sure.
And so it would be less than this.
Okay, because in general, my understanding is one of the value propositions of community solar is it's basically supposed to be the
That
lowest
is.
cost option out there.
That certainly is supposed to be, yeah.
Carry on.
Okay. Here are the tentative next steps of the program. Approval and development. Staff plans to take the program design and then the agreements in substantial form to the Finance Committee in February and then to the Council in March. And depending on a variety of factors, the timetable for the program launches is listed there. And here again is the summary of the recommendation. Thanks very much for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I do have a couple of questions and I have a few comments, and we'll go around and see what everyone else has to say. First of all, my understanding from the memo and just in general is that the idea is the program participant, meaning the homeowner or the business, pays for the panels up front in full. In other words, I buy one panel, I pay in full as opposed to over time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Next, has CEC identified where they are going to install their project?
They, like all of the other vendors who had responded to the RFP, have had an eye on Palo Alto and also our CLEAN program, and so they have leads within the service territory. They have not gained site control, and certainly they are hoping for city utility-led facilitation to help secure sites. I think in the past for the CLEAN program, one issue that has arisen, is certainly site control, and with a community solar program, which has a lot of very positive PR value, the expectation is it will be easier than with just the feed-in tariff program.
And is CPAU or other parts of Palo Alto city government in fact working with CEC to identify a place to put these panels?
Not until a contract is in place.
I see. So the order of operations is contract first, identify place second, with an understanding then that we may spend a whole bunch of time on a contract and never end up with a project if we can't find the place.
It's possible that we would end up with a contract, and yes.
Right. No one would, I assume, it would obviously the contract would be designed, there'd be no liability in either direction or anything like that, but it's just, I suppose, a risk everyone takes of time and effort and so on and so forth. Okay, my comments on this are, in general, I'm very, very supportive of community solar. I think it's an excellent idea to allow people, residents, businesses in the city who do not have access to solar currently because of they rent their house is shaded, this, that, the other thing, to have access to it. So I think the program makes a lot of sense. In terms of the rate design or how we go, I would far prefer virtual net metering, simply because the idea basically, that's the closest to having solar panels on your roof. The electricity comes, and you remove that much electricity from your bill, and everyone lives happily ever after. If we can't accommodate that because of our wonderful billing system, I guess there's not much we can do about it. And given that fact, I think the proposal to basically use the same price as the feed-in, the CLEAN program makes sense. I can't particularly see any reason to do any other price, and so that's fine. That then leaves Ms. King's issue of what to do with the RECs up in the air. I'm sort of still struggling with this one a bit, and I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say. But just as I sort of think about it, I'm kind of okay with what is being proposed by the staff here, sorry, Ms. King, in that I don't particularly think that residents, and I'm focusing on residents, but it could be businesses here, are going to lose too much sleep over the city retiring the REC on its side of the ledger rather than the other side. So again, I'll be interested what anyone else to say. I think I'm okay with it, and the point of effectively browning green power doesn't seem quite right. So I think I'm okay with that aspect of it. So bottom line, I'm supporting the proposal, but I will be interested for other folks' comments on the REC issue. That's that. Who's next?
I got to say, it's pretty fun being a commissioner in a city like this that has these great ideas and consistently comes up with them. So I want to commend you. While we do that, I think we also have to look at what obligations the city is really picking up and what risks that consumers or customers might have if they sign up for the program. So on that point, I was wondering if what kind of audit right in the contract that the CPO writes with the community solar, what do we call it? The
Project LLC, or the community, Clean Energy Collective, CEC, the vendor.
Yes, the vendor. I'll just call it the vendor. In that contract between the CPAU and the vendor, what audit rights are there, and are those audit rights extended to participants? For example, this vendor really is, in some ways, is behaving like a little mini utility to those who sign up for it. It doesn't provide everything that CPAU provides, but in many ways, it provides the hard bricks and mortar project. It maintains the project. It ensures that project continues to operate for 20, 25 years to that entity. So what assurances are there that would between the city and the vendor that would be sustained? What can the customer rely on?
And if I can just add to the question, so we don't have to come back to this topic later.
Yeah.
Can you tell us if this vendor is a for-profit company or a nonprofit? Is it a kind of co-op? Tell us a little bit about what they are, in addition to the questions of our ability to audit their finances to make sure that they don't have inappropriate administrative costs, for example.
Right. And let me just add two pieces. I don't want to add too many things to your list, but what would there be in the form of dispute resolution process?
Well,
and
let me just ask a question. Between the participant and the company, or between the city and the company?
Well, so the way I understand it, the vendor and CPAU will set up the framework for this entire operation. So those who sign up for it would probably be given a standard contract provided by the vendor, saying, here it is. We offer you X kilowatts based on your load. Here's the pricing. Here's the sign over here. And so I think that understood when I'm a resident signing up for that is between the vendor and CPAU would be a certain framework behind the scenes that's going to protect me as the resident.
But Commissioner Foster's question, I think, is part and parcel of what we're all asking. If it looks like there's mismanagement, do the homeowners have to individually or collectively put together a lawsuit, or do they get some help from the city in doing so? So I think all three of us are asking a related set of questions.
Right. And then the final one would be, the final one related to that is the city contemplated if all else fails and this vendor crumbles, disappears, runs out of town, whatever. I'm not suggesting anything. I know nothing about this vendor, and I don't in any way mean to imply that, but just in terms of conceptually, if the vendor had to disappear, would CPAU step in and continue to function for those entities, individuals signed up?
Okay. So regarding, I'll take the softball question first, the type of company that CEC is. A Clean Energy Collective, not to be confused with California Energy Commission, of course, is an LLC. It is a for-profit company. And for each community solar project, they set up an individual LLC. And they've worked with around 18 utilities across the country, although they have not yet had a project in California. They also, of those 18 utilities, they've had 40 plus community solar projects. And so of all of the vendors working in the space of community solar, they by far have the most experience with community solar, which is part of the reason why they're the selected vendor. Regarding the longevity of CC, that certainly was an issue that came up, repeatedly during the evaluation process, and they have designed their program such that the projects can continue if something were to happen to them. One way in which they do that is each project LLC has a trust as a part of it, and that trust is seeded in the very beginning of the establishment of the program with a certain amount of money, and that trust is dedicated to operations and maintenance for the lifetime of the system. In addition to that seed money, Also, a fraction of the PPA payment is diverted. It does not go, a fraction does not go to the participant. It's diverted into this O&M trust to maintain the performance of that system throughout the lifetime, the 20 or 25-year lifetime.
Who are the trustees of that trust? Who runs the trust? Any idea?
Who runs the trust?
In other words, does the vendor effectively run the trust, or back to this issue of mismanagement and so on and so forth? Right.
Well, or is it more of an escrow account than a trust?
I think it's more of an escrow. The operation.
By which I mean there are conditions under which the money can and can't be tapped.
Right, like who makes that decision?
Well, they have different outcomes in bankruptcy law.
Well, okay, it's something that would be, I'm sure, looked into in the contracting stage. I mean, the fundamental idea is how people, I think our fundamental point here, right, is Palo Alto ratepayers are putting money into this thing, and how do we protect them?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The first thing that happens is the Palo Alto ratepayers are writing a big check. That's the first thing, because, as somebody's question made clear, this isn't something that's being financed like the Solar City model. This is something like the homeowner that buys the panel herself.
Right.
Okay, this is Jessica Mullen from the City Attorney's Office, and I also just to kind of give a big picture, and jump in if I'm kind of portraying this incorrectly, but on page 5 of your staff report, you sort of, in the first full paragraph there, you'll kind of see a brief overview that describes the 3 agreements that are kind of the components of this particular program. So you'll have a clean program PPA with the city. The city will also execute an agreement with the vendor covering program marketing, administration, enrollment, and integration of monthly billing, and then also a participation agreement. So as those are all negotiated and worked out, a lot of the risk considerations associated with the individual participants that you guys are identifying here will be embedded into one of those 3 agreements. So that's sort of the structure.
So I do want to get back to giving you a chance to answer our onslaught of questions, because I think that the reference to the first complete paragraph on page 5 that we just heard about from the city attorney's office, I find completely unreassuring. This is nothing like the city's PPAs. The city's PPAs don't involve the city putting up any money up front, and they certainly don't involve the ratepayers writing a check up front. So the fact that there may be contracts in place that theoretically provide the protection that was just referred to, I think our questions get at how rock solid are those protections and what are the mechanisms to audit if there's malfeasance and so on and so forth. So I'd like to get back to what you had.
Okay. For this particular program model, a lot of those customer protections are embedded in the participant agreement that's between the participant and CEC, which is, again, an agreement subject to the city's legal review. But in that agreement, like many kind of third-party agreement for solar systems, there is embedded in that a performance stipulation. In addition to that, as Jessica had mentioned, the PPA that we will also have a lot of stipulations to guarantee that in the event something should happen, we're mitigating risk, not just from the city's perspective, but also from the participant's perspective.
But I guess I'm sorry. I'm still left really wondering what the city's responsibility is to protect the ratepayers who choose to participate here, because although there may be a participant agreement, because of the city's involvement, there is no doubt in my mind that the perception of the ratepayers is that they are absolutely putting their trust in the city for the proper management of the checks they're writing for these panels and for the appropriate operation of the vendor, and in particular that the vendor isn't receiving extraordinary profits or having inappropriate large administrative costs. And if the city doesn't think that that's a responsibility the city's undertaking, then I'm worried we may be embarking on a program where we're potentially misleading the ratepayers who would be the participants.
So I'm sorry if I misspoke, but I certainly think that has been, we consider that our responsibility, and for the reasons that you mentioned, to protect our participants. Sorry.
May I just jump back to the question about the trustees that Commissioner Forster asked? So my guess would be the best structure would be is that the city is the trustee, or else that the trust is immediately accessible to the city to administer and to utilize. If they end up in that situation where they're the backstop and they end up providing the service that the residents thought they were buying from the vendor.
Okay. Okay. You can go ahead if you want.
The only, in addition, sorry, not to focus only on sort of the trustee issue, but the point's well taken. The other thing that I feel like I just wanted to kind of give the overview of those 3 particular agreements, and I can drill down in those a little bit more to say that sort of when we talk about the first agreement, which would be the PPA between the city and the vendor, when we are kind of upfront agreeing to this particular price, there are protections, and I think Amy alluded to some of those, that are in place in a PPA if it's not operated correctly, if things sort of fall apart with regards to how the project's being operated. And we in utility ratepayers are paying that elevated price if there's fewer participants or whatever. The PPA has some embedded protections that would come into place there. The second agreement that I think is important when we think about how CEC is going to be administering the program and what obligations that they have is this sort of second agreement here that's listed, which is the agreement with the vendor covering program marketing, administration, enrollment, and, kind of the billing obligations. So, our standard form contracts have kind of auditing language in there that give us that latitude and sort of that leverage to be able to inquire into how consultants and contractors that do work for the city are maintaining their books, and we can ask for that kind of information. So that I would envision, as we negotiate that out with the vendor, would be the place where the city, who does, is acting as kind of a program sponsor here, would sort of build in and layer into those protections, which is to say you are to administer the program in this way. If things go sideways, this is what happens. There'll be indemnity language in there. If we're concerned about how the program's operating and how the numbers are adding up, that would be where the audit language would appear, I think, for sort of how the program is ultimately administered. So that, in addition to kind of the individual participant agreement, which is, you're correct, is really just between the vendor and the individual participant, there's this overarching city vendor agreement that I think addresses many. It would be the place, the proper forum to add many of the protections you guys are sort of hitting on here, all of which I think are very important and valid.
Yes, but the problem is, there is no agreement between the city and the participant. And that's where the hold harmless agreement would normally be. If the city is guaranteeing the participant that if the vendor fails, the city will hold the participant harmless and fulfill the contract, and I don't see under this diagram scheme, I don't see that connection, and that's really makes me nervous. There's somewhere, and it may have to be just written into city ordinance or something that makes that obligation binding, because that really has to be.
Commissioner Moulton, if I may, can we perhaps ask if it was the intention that in the event that this whole thing falls apart, the city would make the participants whole, or if in fact that's not the spirit of what we're doing here?
Let me just say, I feel free to chime in. I'd be very surprised if there is an intention that the city is the ultimate guarantor here.
Exactly.
Could
So
you say that again? I'll just make sure.
And by the way, Vice Chair Waldfogel has a comment, so just to repeat what I said I would be very surprised if the intention is that the city is guaranteeing the obligations to the participants.
I think that's right. I suspect the intention of this is that the risk is ultimately the participants.
I would agree, and I would also
Not the participant. The risk is not the participants. The risk is the cities.
Well, I think what Steve and I are saying is that we believe the way it's going to be set up is that is not, in fact, going to be the case. In fact, the risk will be on the participants, with the caveat that I'm assuming the city, and this goes to these boys, will take all reasonable steps to ensure the setup is such that the risk to the participants is quite low. Let me give you an example. No problem. Let me just provide one little.
Wait a minute.
Right.
I haven't heard anybody in the city say that yet.
Well, all right, so
Got
let's,
two
so,
utilities people and lawyers sitting here, and none of them have said that's where the,
all right,
that's
so,
what the city's gonna do.
so is the, all right, so let's ask that question. Will the city endeavor in
Not
work?
endeavor, will the city,
But it's, okay, but hold on. The city can guarantee.
yes.
That's simple. I don't know whether the city will do it, but that's simple. What I think is more likely, albeit more complicated, is the city will set up a framework that minimizes the risk to the participants. So, for example, the trust setup and so on and so forth. Or, for example, and we haven't discussed this, but ensuring that the vendor maintains adequate insurance so that if tomorrow's storm wipes out the thing, everyone's not up a creek, pun intended. So is the city going to, from the best of your knowledge, or your knowledge, is the city, A, going to guarantee the participants get the benefit of their bargain? B, not going to guarantee it, but endeavor through the legal framework and everything else to minimize the risk? Or C, none of the above?
So so the intent was to minimize the risk.
So that's option B.
Option B.
Not guarantee, but minimize the risk as opposed to just each man or woman for themselves.
Right.
Okay, Jessica?
Because let me just make sure, see if I can understand the question exactly. Are you guys sort of questioning whether when you put up the $1,000, and you think you're going to be getting this sort of solar,
Return for 20 years or
over 20
whatever.
years, and if something happens with the project, what option A is, does the city give you back your $1,000 or whatever's
Or
left?
continue to make the payments.
Or continue to sort
Or
of.
go fix the panels that got blown up in the hurricane.
Right, so that's what you're talking about is option A, and option B is if something goes sideways with the project, is the city going to try and do everything it can to try and engineer another operator,
No, option B was the city does everything it can up front with the time this is all put together so that it foresees what could go south. Vendor goes bankrupt, floods and natural
trust
disasters,
aside,
or
insurance.
solar panels stop
Okay.
working, or whatever else.
Yes, so, right, so my understanding is that we would be operating under, I think B is the correct answer there.
And let me just say that I would assume you can insure against most risks in this world. And so the obvious thing to do is you find someone to step in as an insurer, and the insurer Asher, that's right, we forgot to go to you, so go ahead. You're up. Vice Chair Waldfogel.
Oh, sorry.
Again, the joy of being at the end of the table. Something that I think would help would be to back up just a little bit and explain why we're looking at such a complicated program and vehicle, because one could imagine CEC or some other entity doing this and then just selling or just offering the revenue streams back to the subscribers to the project, and CEC just being a clean program participant. So I think you need to back up and say a word or two about why the city is injecting itself as a party and participant in this in the first place.
Thank you very much for that question. So there are two kind of legal umbrellas that can pose risks. One of them is related to advertising a program and like the environmental attributes associated with that program, such as the speaker was referring to. So consumer protection, so that's one area. The second area, which is kind of a larger area, is securities law. And so Commissioner Waldfogel had asked, why do we need to be involved at all, basically? If CEC wanted to develop a clean project and get the 16.5 cents and then disperse it to participants, that disbursement would be subject to the application of securities laws. And so then they would need to comply with all of the Securities and Exchange Commission regulations. Under the proposed program design that the Clean Energy Collective has set up, the utility bill is required to basically make the connection between this value, this monetary bill credit, and the energy that's associated with. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think what you're doing is you're revealing some of the contradictions in the discussion, because I think, I mean, we're talking about taking as much care as we can up front to reduce risk, but we're still exposing the participants in the program essentially to the risks that a non-qualified investor would be exposed to in an SEC registered security. And that seems to me to be the contradiction that we're discussing here, that these are the risks that a non-qualified investor knowingly takes on when investing in a project.
So I'm going to chime in on that because I understand your concern, but I come down to a different viewpoint. My sense is the risk that the investor, homeowner, business, ratepayer, whatever we want to say, is taking is effectively the same risk as if they put a solar system on their roof. And frankly, probably a lower risk, right? Because I have solar panels on my roof. They were installed a number of years ago by a vendor. I have by a small vendor, it wasn't Solar City or something like that. I have no idea if that vendor's around. If that system stops working, I'm completely on my own. Whereas with a community solar, I feel like my odds would be better that I'd actually see my return for 25 years. So to me, it seems more, and it gets back to this whole issue that this is a comparable thing to putting solar panels on your roof. So at the end of the day, my gut feeling is if the homeowner is in no worse position or not in a riskier position, I think that's okay. I think the issue here is more the cities. If something somehow went wrong, it would obviously not be good for the city. So I think the city should do everything it can to mitigate risk. I don't expect the city to guarantee it, but taking all steps at the beginning to ensure the trust makes sense, the trustees make sense, the insurance is placed, and trying to think through all the things that could go wrong makes sense. So that's my thoughts on it.
So,
May I just, before you,
yes.
if that indeed is going to be the city's position, then I think it is incumbent upon the utilities in their marketing materials to disclose that fact, and that this project is not guaranteed by the city. The city will do everything it can to minimize the risk, but it is not guaranteed. And I don't know what that will do to the participation rate, but I think that fact needs to be quite well disclosed. That should not be in the fine print.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to say one more thing that's on the cautionary stage, and then something that is in a totally different vein. So the first one, the cautionary stage, is I think that I imagine that the city council, a future city council, when confronted by hypothetically a failed project, by a show of force, by all the participants showing up and saying the city let us down, we put the money in, you orchestrated it, your agreement, you made this all happen. Yes, there was some fine print, but gosh, we couldn't understand what that was without hiring lawyers. We're not in that. We're just simply homeowners. We signed up. We thought it was going to be fine. City orchestrated it. I think a city council placed with a show of that, and together with all the press coverage and so on, there's going to be an appeal, a kind of a natural appeal to the community at large that the city, the CPO let the community down, or at least these individuals who signed up. I'm sort of with Commissioner Melton on that. I think he and I see that outcome fairly similarly. Yeah. However, let me just switch to the other mode. Is that if we never took any risks and moved forward with things like this, we would not be Palo Alto. We have to take a reasonable set of risks, understand it, make the disclosures, make sure everybody's put the best structure that we can together, find a vendor in the way you have, and then move forward. So I think that overall, I'm inclined to go forward with this, understanding that, but I really, really think the utility has a huge obligation to do what Commissioner Melton just said, not only in fine print, but really explicit, plain English. You're on your own here.
Again, I think we have to step back and remember this program basically allows people who cannot get solar now to get solar. And they will end up doing so on better economics than I have it on my house, and that anyone can buy it individually, and at lower risk. Maybe not zero risk, but lower risk. So, this is not buying a U.S. Treasury bill in terms of risk, but it is simply an opportunity to allow people who cannot get solar otherwise to do so, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. Can I step back for just a moment and say, can we talk a little bit about this REC issue? So would anyone on this side of the table like to comment on the REC issue, and would anyone on this side of the table like to comment on the REC issue? Yes, you're right.
Which is, can you just walk us, can you walk us through how the renewable attributes work with the CLEAN program and with the, with homeowner located solar? Just so that we have some comps in our head as you walk us through the renewable attributes of this program.
With the CLEAN program, the rate of 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour is for not just the electricity, but all of the output, including the renewable energy credits. And through the CLEAN program, those renewable energy credits are used for the city's renewable portfolio standard. For home ownership, if a customer were to install solar on their own home, then within Palo Alto, they would own the renewable energy credits associated with the electricity generated by that system. Okay, so that's the kind of existing structure.
And what you're saying is this program would mimic the CLEAN program.
This program would mimic the CLEAN program. It would be like a CLEAN program, but with community solar on top of it, such that if participation rate were 0, we would actually have a CLEAN project.
Right. And hence this idea that the renewable energy credit is transferred to the city.
That's
and retired by the city and thus counted towards the city's RPS.
That's right.
More?
Yeah, any other comments on
No, I was going to leave Rex.
Okay, no, hang on. Any other comments on Rex?
The only quick item I would add is I think you touched on something during the public comment portion, which is that the FTC is really the agency that's focused on kind of advertising, consumer protection. They tend to get involved when there's kind of like greenwashing type of stuff. So there's kind of that marketing disclosure, how we talk about products piece. And then there are other overlapping state level agencies that are dealing with kind of REC tracking and those types of options.
So Jessica, what I'd say on this, I'm comfortable going forward with this personally. We'll see where everyone else is with the staff proposal on this as it is, including the REC component. Having said that, I think it would make sense for the city attorney's office to take a look at this issue, and I certainly am comfortable with you guys figuring this out. And obviously, if we somehow can't do that, then adjusting it accordingly. You cool with that?
That makes sense.
Technical term. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Yes.
Rex or?
No, Rex.
Could I just ask for a similar treatment of the SEC issue, which is if this whole structure is being built in a way to, I'm not going to use the C word, the circumvent word, but if the whole structure is being built around some interpretations of SEC rules, it would be great if there was an opinion letter somewhere, or if there was some legal ruling that this particular structure is in fact not a security under the under the appropriate federal acts.
So I'm glad you raised that, because that was something I think going into the program was a legal complexity that we actually really wanted to look at specifically, given the structure, for all the reasons that you're talking about. So the way that we've approached it specifically in this RFP in consultation with Molly Stump, also city attorney in the office, was to, as part of the RFP, require the proposer to basically take on the liability and indemnify the city in full for the structure of the program, such that if there is a subsequent SEC type of ruling that says, or further refinement of existing rulemakings that say programs like this are in fact security type programs, which would impose some potential liability on the city as the program sponsor, that the vendor is taking on all of the liability for that and basically indemnifying the city for the structure expressly in the contract.
And indemnifying participants.
Well, I don't know if it I mean, I don't know that well, so actually, let me take a step back. So that's an important point, actually, because the liability for this would be only with the city as sort of the program sponsor. The participants, the customers would have no securities law exposure as purchasers. They would actually be the potential people who are saying, hey, you city were selling me a security and you should have disclosed all of this stuff about the program, or there was fraud, or there was a material misrepresentation, Section 10B kind of problem. So they would be the ones claiming that there was liability, not the ones who would be subject to liability themselves. Right. So I feel like that's an issue that we've thoroughly vetted, and I know that myself and sort of our approach that we're taking here has comfort at the city attorney's office level all the way to the top in terms of kind of how we're protecting ourselves against potential securities law risks.
I think you and I both have comments. Which one of us should?
I don't have a comment. I'm ready to move. Once you go, you come back.
I have a couple comments and questions. First of all, thank you all for just doing an incredible job on a complicated and important project as we throw questions at you, undoubtedly some of which you hadn't anticipated. So thank you so much. I am wildly supportive, by the way, of community solar. And in fact, I think everyone in the room is, and that's gone unstated as we've gotten into the weeds and the details. But this is just an incredibly positive thing, as I think Commissioner Foster pointed out. So I'm just thrilled that we're doing community solar. In fact, I'm so thrilled that I'm not sure why we want a 3 megawatt cap. I'm not sure why we want any cap at all on the program. Did you want to comment on that?
So the cap was suggested because we had also recommended the clean rate of 16.5 cents, which you know from the last presentation is above the avoided cost. And so that was the motivation for including the cap, to limit the potential impact to ratepayers.
Right. So fair enough. Although this is such a terrific program, I would consider removing the cap. But 3 megawatts, is a pretty large cap. That corresponds to the equivalent of 1,000 homes. And
How much do we have in the city currently?
how many megawatts of solar?
6 megawatts currently. Okay.
So
They'll be back if they bust through the cap.
That's right. On the other hand, we could comment on that tonight in our motion if we wanted to. I have another minor question, but in a minute, then I want to get back to the big point we've been talking about. What happens if a ratepayer chooses to be a participant and then sells their house or leaves Palo Alto?
Sure, thank you for that question. If a ratepayer becomes a participant and signs the agreement with CEC, this is actually an asset ownership model, so they have papers representing their panels. They cannot go out on the market and just sell it to some other participant within CPAU. Let me back up. You have to be within CPAU service territory in order to receive the billing credits. And so therefore, if they move outside, they cannot continue to receive that benefit. So then if they could either donate it to the schools, for instance, or another nonprofit, that's certainly an option, or they could have the option to sell it if they so wish to do that. But it has to be facilitated by CEC to ensure that the price that it's selling for is not speculative. Otherwise, it could be deemed a security.
And sell it to the buyer of the house or sell it to anybody?
Anyone.
Service territory. Okay.
We're expecting a wait list of participants, so hopefully that will be
So I guess I want to come back to the question of looking at risks to participants. I was also going to ask about risks and exposure to the city, but I think you've largely dealt with that. So my primary and frankly pretty significant concern at this point is risks and exposure to participants. We actually just stumbled on a minor one. What if when someone's selling their house and leaving the area, for some reason they have trouble selling their interest in this for whatever reason? Maybe there isn't a waiting list of buyers, and maybe the vendor has structured the program in some way that makes it financially unattractive to just bundle it with your house when someone buys your house. If I put solar panels on my roof, it increases the asset value of my house, and I expect to get it back when I sell my house, even if I'm not going to stay in my house for 20 or 30 years. In this case, I'm investing in another 20 or 30 year asset that requires me to be within the rate territory of Palo Alto. Many of us won't be, and so understanding how to sell these things and understanding how the city can step in and hit the vendor over the head with a 2x4 and get them to behave if they're misbehaving is something that we ought to be very concerned about in the contract. A lot was said tonight about the role of the city of Palo Alto in protecting the participants, but neither the memo nor the slide deck are anywhere near as strong on the subject of the city of Palo Alto protecting participants as some of tonight's discussion would suggest. And I think that's a real problem in terms of the recommendation we're being asked to make tonight. I mean, the slide deck in particular on slide 8 says that the City of Palo Alto Utilities is about applying monthly bill credits to program participants. We sure expect the City of Palo Alto Utilities to do a whole lot more than correctly apply bill credits. Page 5 of the memo says that City of Palo Alto Utilities' responsibilities are limited to reviewing the program marketing materials, vendor strategy, and plans to administer the program. That is really weak language, and it's way weaker than what was discussed tonight. Tonight we heard some claims by, I think, some of my colleagues that we hope and assume that Palo Alto will do everything that it can to protect the ratepayers. Well, as every lawyer or anyone who knows a lawyer knows, that the contract will absolutely not say that Palo Alto is going to do everything. At best, it will say that they'll make reasonable efforts or commercially reasonable efforts or all possible efforts or some qualifier like that. So Palo Alto certainly isn't going to do everything in its power to protect the ratepayers. And as I said, the memorandum as written suggests that there's in fact an arm's length relationship. On the other hand, we heard some comment a minute ago about Palo Alto sponsoring the program. I'm not even sure I know what that word means in this context, but I do know that the agreement is not between the ratepayers and the City of Palo Alto. It's between the ratepayers and the vendor. So while I appreciate my fellow commissioners' comments that we need to be willing to take risks to do something as innovative as community solar, I'm really uneasy, because when I put panels on my roof, I know it's my responsibility. I know I need to make sure that they're going to withstand storms. I know that I might want insurance. But when I engage in a deal like this, I'm one of many participants on something that the city has its fingerprints all over. I don't think I'm going to worry about whether they're adequately insured and well managed. And frankly, even if I was worried, it's not clear I can get access to their operations. So I do think the city has a special responsibility. And it may be that the city intends to assume it. It may even be in the draft of the PPA agreement that's lurking somewhere, but it's not represented adequately in the memorandum we're being asked to approve tonight. And so as wildly supportive of community solar and as impressed with tonight's discussion as I am, I think we need to seriously consider rejecting the motion to recommend this. I'm not sure there's any amendment or qualification that can make this acceptable in its present form.
Let me ask a question. Do you feel comfortable, without resolutions and so on and so forth, saying on behalf of the city attorney's office that before this program goes into effect, because we're not the ones to approve it, we merely recommend things, that between here and where it gets approved, the city attorney's office will ensure that all reasonable measures are taken to the insurance, the trustee, the this, the that, and the everything else to protect the participants in the program?
So I appreciate the question, just to kind of lay out like where this is in the process. And, you know, Amy Bailey, who's up here, and Monica Padilla is also in the audience in case any of them want to weigh into, and I'm mischaracterizing how they were planning on bringing this forward. But I think tonight what they were seeking from you was kind of this high-level policy discussion and direction as far as some of the items highlighted in the staff report about, you know, prices, rates. And the other thing that I'm hearing coming through is we want a clear understanding about what the relationship is between the city and the participants. We want a clear description of kind of the risks associated with the program to the participants in marketing materials. We also want a clear demarcation of to what extent is the city actually, helping to stave off any of these risks for the participants, and what level is that, and where are we kind of coming down on that. And so the next stage of this process, sort of better characterizing those in whatever report you feel like it's not fully fleshed out here. And so the next step for this is, if you're comfortable with kind of the general policy, either as recommended by staff or with some of the additions on these high level points that you're making, thematic points that I think all of you have made tonight in terms of disclosures and like the relationship between the city and the participant, then the next step is to actually take the contracts themselves to council to be approved. Will they be fully negotiated, and we'll push for various items. And then in that staff report, it would say, the PPA does this, the overall agreement with the vendor does this. There are risks to participants that are A, B, C, and D. And then council would, say thumbs up, thumbs down. Are we comfortable with structuring the program this way? And then the contract will be fully fleshed out.
But the problem with what you're saying is that it's not clear that the issues that we're raising tonight can be addressed in the contract. It's possible that the issues we're raising cannot be addressed within this broad framework. And so to simply paper over, sorry, no insult intended, to simply paper over some of the things that we've raised tonight and say, well, it'll all be addressed through a full and robust negotiation process, presumes that these issues can be addressed at that stage, and it's not clear to me that they can. For example, some of the things that have been raised tonight can perhaps only be addressed if the vendor agrees to complete transparency of all of their books. And it may turn out in the negotiation process that the vendor says, no, we're not prepared to provide complete transparency. We're prepared to only provide financial reports that describe the following things, but not complete transparency where we open our books. More like the level of transparency that a publicly traded corporation or a nonprofit would provide, but not full open books.
And I completely agree with you that I think that is a result of a negotiation, and how I've approached kind of contracts that have a lot of complex issues such as these embedded in them is when we're describing those contracts in our staff reports that go to council is, you sort of say these are the features of the contract, and then there's a section where there are particular things that maybe you have wanted or you haven't been able to get, or significant risks either to the city or potentially to the customers, given that there is kind of this relationship that I think the points that you talk about clarifying are points that are well taken. That's the section where you disclose, well, we would have liked, the risk associated with this contract is that we will only be getting these things and not maybe everything that we want. So
Right.
council can make a fully informed decision about the program when it's fully cooked and the risks associated with it.
Sure, but by the time we're having that discussion, 6 months from now? When does it, something like that, right? By the time we're actually having that discussion well into 2015, we're going to feel a lot more committed and pregnant with this high-level approach, because as you just made it clear, the thing we're being asked to approve tonight is this high-level approach. And so if, in fact, it's going to be difficult or impossible to address our concerns about participant risk within the context of this structure, and if, in fact, we want to encourage the city to re-examine other structures where, for example, the city owns and operates community solar, or where something other than a for-profit company owns and operates the community solar, now's the time for us to raise that, not 6 months from now when we see what the details of the contract look like.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if we want to continue on this theme or we want to try to wrap it. So let me put a motion out, but it doesn't foreclose discussion. Of course it doesn't. But I was going to make let me make a motion and then comment on my own motion. My comment is to decline or reject the city's proposal tonight, but encourage the city to come back with whatever embellishments or further work on this the city feels is or CPO feels is helpful to us. I'm very willing to see it, but the one thing I absolutely don't want to, I do want to see is in plain English a kind of a list with some explanation around it of all of the risks that the city CPO believes it is taking with these, and separately all the risks or the caveats that CPO would want to have in the agreement between the vendor and the participants, so that, so that each of those who sign up can see it. So I know that's a long motion, but let me summarize. The motion is to to reject the proposal tonight and invite the city to come back with the risks both to the city and participants clearly explained.
Anyone want to second that?
Sure, I'll second that.
Okay, so let's discuss that now. I think we can have discussion. I appreciate the reason for that. I will vote against that and will make a substitute motion because although again I understand the reason, I am comfortable that the staff will address this in the manner you're speaking without us having to actually reject their motion to do so. In other words, from the conversation we've had, I am confident that this will come in the months ahead through the negotiation process. And so that is why I do not think we have to reject the motion. So I will make a substitute motion that we approve the staff proposal as is, with the understanding and request that the staff will take the steps we've discussed to address the concerns raised about minimizing risk to participants. So that is my substitute motion. Would anyone like to second my substitute motion?
Your substitute motion is essentially staff
Is to support the staff recommendation. That's correct. There does not, however, appear to be a second for my motion, so my motion fails. So is there any other discussion on the original motion?
I guess I'd just like to sort of make clear, we're all really supportive of community solar and really impressed with what you and your colleagues have done. I think, at least for me, the discovery through tonight's discussion is a deeper understanding of potential risks, primarily to participants, but also perhaps to the city. And I think it may well be that we'll eventually recommend council approval of something very much like what you presented tonight. But I think we're all just struggling to feel like the risks are understood.
To clarify, I think 4/5 of us are struggling.
Correct. Sorry, I didn't.
1/5 of us
Actually,
is okay.
I didn't mean to speak for anyone. I am.
That's
I am
okay.
struggling. Fine. No, I am struggling.
Just give you a hard time.
The minutes shall show.
So I will
that
say,
I'm
folks,
struggling to understand.
Yeah, Commissioner Melton.
So let me take a shot at there's damn, I can't remember. You can help me out here. So table the motion is so.
John, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to?
What I'm trying
to not have to reject.
What I'm trying not to. I don't want to reject what is here. I want to table the discussion on this item until staff returns with a fuller discussion and disclosure on the question of risk, both risk to the city, which is, the city attorney believes there are few, that those have already been addressed, so I'm not particularly concerned about that, but risk to the participants and what the proposal is for how to manage those risks. So basically, this is what I'm proposing is this is great as far as it goes, but we've uncovered an area in which we all have some concern about participant risk and the city's management of that.
So if I understand correctly, what you're,
So
I
I'm
think where you're getting.
proposing to table item 2
Right.
until.
Take no vote.
Until, no vote at all. Just table it until.
So, and let's discuss that for a moment. Let me just say one other thing, folks. Keep in mind that after this comes here, then my guess is the next stop is the Finance Committee. Then the next stop is the City Council. So I do feel a little bit of like Palo Alto process going on here. You know, and if I'm the vendor, all the hurdles we make them jump through, which they probably don't have to deal with other jurisdictions, but you know, it's going to the UAC. Now, It will go to the UAC again 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Then to the finance committee, who knows what they'll say. Then to the city council. You can feel like the oxygen being sucked out of one's lungs. So that's why I'm confident that the staff here will in fact do the things we're talking about, for what it's worth. Steve, go ahead.
Well, and in fact, I think what Commissioner Foster is saying is an argument to just go ahead and vote on it, and if we reject it, fine, we reject it. Staff can still take it to finance over our rejection.
That's true.
Our rejection is just a recommendation. And I guess the thing that I do like about the discussion we've had and potentially about rejecting it is we've heard from the council members again and again. They want us to behave not merely as advisory, but they want us to behave as if the responsibility for the decision is ours to make, given what's in front of us, and not sort of rely on subsequent levels. So.
Okay, so let's see, where we left off, you can still make a substitute motion.
I can make a motion to table the item.
Okay, so anyone want to second that one? Okay.
I mean, what's the difference between table and reject?
Because we don't reject what's here already. We're just asking for more.
My guess is there's not a lot of
There's no vote.
practical difference,
Practically, there's probably no difference.
but yeah, it avoids the appearance of that we rejected the proposal.
How do you feel?
I would like to, I would like to do something we're obviously not going to do, which is approve it. So, so I'm going to stick with my guns and be all by myself and wanting to approve it. And so I think it's really up to the three of you to decide if you want to go John's route or Garth's route.
Well, I'm really asking Garth because you.
I think with the language and the enthusiasm that we have threaded through this discussion, I think there's no material distinction between the two. I'd rather just stay with my motion.
Okay, so now we've got your motion, which is looking for a second.
Looking for a second.
Is there a second? So it doesn't sound like it's coming from Garth. Isn't coming from here. Now we're back to your motion, which I think did have a second, right? Yours had a second? Okay, now we vote on that. All in favor?
Wait a minute, repeat the motion.
So, okay,
The motion is to reject the staff's recommendation, come back to the commission with whatever modification staff believes is appropriate based on this discussion, plus explicitly two sets of embellishments. And one is the set of risks that the city believes it is undertaking or commitments it's making to residents. And the other one being the set of risks that the city believes that residents are incurring by signing up to participate.
okay, got that? So we got a second on that one. And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Me. But that's okay.
Did you vote or abstain?
He voted in favor.
Okay.
So there you go. Are we done with that one? Okay, with that, you want to go get my good friend Mr. Cook over there? He's coming? All right, hang on, so we'll do our shift. You're back. Boy, you didn't think it was going to take that long, did you?
You can wake up now. Boy, sorry. Man, we did not see that.
I just have to get a drink of water. I'm done. I'm literally.
Wait, you're recused from water.
Jane, do you know if we can get drinks? The refrigerator's locked.
Who's got the key?
Is the
Jessica, come
refrigerator
on, you're a
locked?
city attorney.
Council chambers? Or is that, you don't know? Okay.
Are we taking an official break?
We are taking a, looks like a 30-second official break.